You've heard it that lowering the Fed rate will make mortgages cheaper. All right, we're going to tell you the real story. This is the real story with Adam and Sherry. I'm Adam Hamalian,
And I'm Sherry Hutchens.
and we're two broker associates with over 40 years of experience in the Contra Costa County. And we're here to tell you things about buying and selling homes in our neighborhood. Hey, Sherry,
Hey, Adam.
I
How
guess we
are
got to
you?
rework that intro now that we're making changes. That didn't flow like it was supposed to.
Well, now you have to remember two scripts instead of just one.
Yeah, got to make it up.
Yeah.
Well, so welcome to 2026. We're pretty excited about a new year, both kind of real estate wise, but also professional wise. Sherry, why don't you start by telling us a little bit about what's happening in the early market here in 2026?
Well, I think one of the most telling signs that we're going to have a robust spring is we had a 10-page tour today for
That-
Broker's Tour.
That's amazing. So today's Tuesday, and so Central Contra Costa County realtors do tours,
Mhm.
brokers tour today, and 10 pages. This is only the second week of January. That's
That's
kind
a
of incredible.
lot.
Yeah.
That is a lot for this time of year. I mean, normally it's 2 or 3 pages this time of year, but I was surprised that it was 10 and lots of listings across all of the different cities.
I was at the Rossmore marketing meeting this morning, and there was eight homes on the market on the broker's tour today.
Yeah, I saw
The
that.
listings are down. There's only usually there's about 100 up there, but I think there's only about 55 right now. So
Oh,
uh,
wow.
to have eight of those, that's more than 10% was on tour today. So it'll be interesting to see what 2026 provides kind of for buyers and sellers.
I think
The
it's a good time. I think we've got a good year ahead.
Yeah. Before we jump into interest rates, and we have one of our favorite guests back on the podcast today, and Arlo Zoerner from CrossCountry Mortgage, but we'll get to him in a moment. We're going to make our a little announcement about that we're starting a second podcast, which is very exciting. And some of you are going, I can't believe you have enough to fill up one podcast, let alone two. So here's the truth of the matter is we're actually splitting our podcast into two, and that this one is going to stay focused on buyers and sellers. And if you're in the market to buy or sell your home or buy an investment or anything about home ownership, that's going to continue to stay right here at the Real Story with Adam and Sherry.
Yeah.
But we're adding a second podcast, which is going to take half of our weeks away, and it's going to be what we're calling the coaching edition, and it's going to be focused purely on agents and agent development, agent professionalism, passion about selling real estate, and hopefully those two together will equal some profits. And Sherry, you want to tell people why the second podcast?
Yeah, a couple months ago, our broker, Julie Del Santo, came to us and asked us if we would like to take on the role of agent development within the company, which was very exciting. We both enjoy teaching and coaching, and we said yes.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. It's a little bit of giving back. There's, money wise, it's minimal, but really, it's the job satisfaction of feeling like you're making a difference, not only in your clients' lives, but in our colleagues. And I'll have to confess, I think part of it is I'd love to elevate the level of professionalism in our industry.
Mhm.
There's a reason why people don't have a great perception of real estate agents is that it doesn't take much to get your license, and then people don't tell you really how to do your job well.
Yeah.
They might teach you about sales, but they don't teach you about how to be a good agent. And that's what we hope to do is to help elevate that professionalism and then also help people identify what's valuable to them about it personally so that at the end of the day, when they put their head on the pillow, they know that they did a good job and that those two things together will lead to a healthy and sustainable income.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. We did a little bit of coaching. I think it's been a year already with a couple agents at our office, and both of them are doing so well. One of them was an agent who'd been with the company for 5 years and still really was not sure how to do her job. So we worked with her for a few months, and to watch her just take off and soar and have an amazing year made me feel so good because this is not a hard business, but there are a few things that you need to know to succeed. And she just took it in and applied everything we told her that she needed to do, and she had a fantastic year.
Yeah. I disagree with you in that it's not a hard business. It's hard to do it right. So,
It's hard to do it right. Absolutely.
yeah. Hey,
Absolutely.
so we're going to get back to focusing on buyers and sellers. And so one of the hot topics that everybody asks and everybody's paying attention to, whether it's their own personal finances or the national news, and that has to do with mortgage rates. And
Mhm.
so we're really excited to welcome again Arlo Zoerner from CrossCountry Mortgage. Hi, Arlo.
Yay, Arlo.
Good afternoon, guys. Thank you again for having me. It's always fun to be here with you.
Yeah, it's great. So, Arlo is the only guest to be on our podcast more than once, and this is actually his third time because, interest rates are one of those kind of moving targets, and there's so much about it, and it plays such a big role in, the word that we're hearing out there, affordability. So, Arlo, if you were gonna put a summary on 2025 from the mortgage lending business, and then we'll talk about going forward in 2026 in a moment. What are some words that
Yeah.
you would use to describe mortgage lending last year?
Pretty stable. I mean, I think we've come out of the three of the most challenging years that we've seen in over 20 years. I've
Yep.
done this since 2002, and we went through the financial crisis from roughly like 2008 to 2010, but that actually just created a ton of opportunity for people. So even though it was a really challenging time for the country as a whole, and real estate went through a big transition, there was so much upside attached to that period and so much opportunity in that period. But in the last 3 years with the high rate environment, we haven't seen all that upside and all that opportunity. So 2025 was the third year that we'd been in this quote unquote high rate environment where mortgages went from 3% to 7% in 2022 in a matter of 4 or 5 months.
That was
And
brutal.
That
yeah,
was tough.
so we saw some rate improvements last year. Consumers have acclimated to the climate that we're in. I'm not really getting, in the very beginning, it was a lot of shell shock and a really challenging time. And so 2025 was a pretty stable year. And I think we saw just some stability or acceptance kind of come back to our market of what's possibly going to be a bit of a new normal with where we are with rates.
Yeah. It's interesting because, so often we hear whether it's real estate or other people making predictions for the future year. And I'm curious if we went back a year ago and looked at everyone's predictions for interest rates. I feel like there was a whole lot of chatter that we would get below six, and like you were saying, stable. I feel like it was maybe there was a couple times when it flirted with that, but we were like 6 and 6.25 for most of the year. I mean, is that my perception, or is that more
That
accurate?
that is perception. It's so interesting. I would emotionally, I would completely agree with you, but because of what I do for work, and also because of some things happening in the last 2 weeks, believe it or not, I think when we started 2025, mortgage rates were at 7 to 7.25%. It's just a bit of like how quickly we forget.
Hmm.
So mortgage rates started the year between 7 and 7.25. If we remember that there's so many once in a lifetimes, right?
Yeah.
But the tariff things that happened in
Oh
the
gosh, yeah.
spring,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, so they started high, dipped down into the low sixes, and everyone's like, great, we've made a lot of progress and low sixes as opposed to 7 to 7.5 where we've been. Then the tariff thing happened in the spring, and mortgages went back to 7 in April.
Oh gosh.
Um,
Okay.
yeah, right. And so I know I forgot myself too. I was just checking some stats. So we ended the year at a yearly low, and also I think basically just touching the low points since 2022. And so it was a little bit more back and forth than you would realize in last year. But the last quarter was pretty uniform for the most part. Still, obviously, always some ups and downs. But yeah, that's a informal rate recap was the top end was 7 or the low sevens, and the bottom end was the very bottom of the sixes for rates of what we saw in 2025.
The so you mentioned the tariffs. What are some of like the big things that affect interest rates. And if you want to distinguish between the Fed rate and mortgage rates, now's the moment to maybe focus on mortgage rates. But what are the macroeconomics as the non-economy person? What is it that
Yeah.
macroeconomics play into the mortgage rate?
Yeah, so without like just getting right to mortgage rates immediately, I mean the macroeconomics that affect interest rates, it's mainly driven by inflation. The main ingredients would be inflation, the bond market, and also just the expectations of where we're headed seem to dictate things. So the Federal Reserve sets what's called short-term interest rates, and they influence the conditions. But mortgage rates are actually really specifically set by the investors who are looking at buying these bonds and securities and trading them. And so the Fed doesn't have direct control over mortgage rates, but they obviously influence those markets.
So when you talk about investors, whether those are big banks or private mortgage lenders or other financial institutions, are I mean, I remember back to the recession, part of how we got into trouble was all the secondary market where banks or the originators would package, millions of dollars of loans together and sell them to the secondary market of investors. Is that still the environment for what you're doing with mortgages or whether it's a big bank or you as a mortgage lender?
Yeah. Yeah, that is still the environment. Mortgages are what they're turned into what's called a mortgage-backed security, and that's what allows them to be traded and be traded in pools. So when I talk about like investors of bonds and investors in the mortgage market, we're not really talking about the end users like you, myself, and Sherry. Us as individual investors, where you have your Robinhood or your Vanguard or your E-Trade, and we're investing in a really small scale. But investors are more like really large investment groups, pension funds. Um,
So like CalPERS
yeah,
manages retirement funds for,
yeah,
however many hundreds of thousands of maybe millions of former state employees. And what they do with their pension money is make investments in different places. And so one of the things that they might do is invest in one of these mortgage-backed securities.
that's exactly right. And so that's really it's the appetite for things like that and the appetite for our treasury bills and longer term bonds. Those are really the ingredients that shape the pricing of how mortgages go. So they tend to follow suit on what the Fed does, but there can be some separation between what the Federal Reserve is doing to control short-term rates and the investors' appetite and the amount of like demand that's out there for purchasing the new bonds or the new mortgages that are originated.
All right. So it's somewhat what those secondary markets is their risk versus what they want to get in return for those investments. That's part of, as opposed to cost of funds. My when my wife and I got our first loan, she was working for World Savings, and so we got an employee loan, and
Yeah,
it was all cost of savings index was our mortgage
yeah,
was tied to the cost of saving index. So basically, the how much it was costing World Savings to pay out on their shareholders. That's they were adding +1 to that, and that's what our rate was.
yeah.
But that's not necessarily yours is more market driven than cost of savings. Is that right? Or I mean,
Yeah,
more not yours, but I mean more typical. We don't have any savings and loans anymore.
yeah, yeah. No, mortgage rates today, like when there's kind of the trickle down effect of what happens, they're really tied to like the overall demand for bonds, and which is highly affected by inflation because inflation is like the biggest enemy of bonds. Um, because as inflation grows over time and your bond stays at a fixed price. So bonds are, if in the future, if inflation is very high and rates are going to go up, your bonds from today aren't really that valuable because they'd rather buy one at a higher rate in, say, 6 months or in 1 or 2 years. So, this trajectory of inflation is really what shapes today's pricing on bonds because, if you do a mortgage today at, say, 6%, around where mortgage rates are. But if there's a lot of inflation and something tells the markets that rates will be higher in a year or two, it devalues the value of a mortgage today because that investor's money is going to be tied up at 6. when in the future they can get 7 or 8. And so that's a bit of like kind of how it works and how the supply and demand all interacts with inflation being the biggest driver.
All right.
I have a question about all of this, Arlo, because as you probably heard in the news, the president has been very vocal about the Fed chairman and his unhappiness with his performance and
Yeah.
his so-called refusal to lower rates. But I don't think the Fed chairman has anything to do with it, really. I mean, could the Fed chairman insist that the rates go down so the president is happy?
It's actually a voting committee. So it's not just Jerome Powell, some to shed some light on that matter. Jerome Powell is our Fed chairman,
Yes,
and his term is going to be up this May of
yes,
2026.
yeah,
And President Trump has wanted Jerome Powell to be out of this position as Fed chairman. He really is a tone setter. So the Fed, they actually, as a group of them, vote on whether they'll raise or lower rates. And his vote is actually equal to everybody else's vote. But he
okay,
sets the tone with this group. And so Trump has wanted him out. There's laws in place. He cannot fire him with the way that the system is set and the laws are in place.
well, he
He's
appointed
talked
him.
he's talked about changing those laws, but there is just too much red tape. And I think it was also your term's up in May, and we're six to like this has been a topic for like between the last big topic for the last 6 months. But at that point, we were within 12 months of his term ending, and how much red tape would actually be involved to change the laws that would
Right.
allow him to fire Jerome Powell. It's not happening. And now at this point, we're 4 or 5 months away. So yeah, there's actually a voting committee. Um, and it looks like we're headed for a well, it looks like we're headed for a lower short-term rate environment when we
Hmm.
get a new Fed chairman. A longer term rate environment, like 10-year bonds and treasuries and 30-year bonds and treasuries, is completely like an unknown situation
Yeah.
because of some of the counter effects of what may happen when they lower short-term rates. So that is the big question mark for this year.
Okay.
And that's probably going to dictate if we stay where we are, we come up a little, or if we come down a little, it'll be how the reaction that investors have to the value of our bonds when we have this new Fed chairman in. So lots to unpack in there.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
The so this is kind of all the background materials, but let's just talk about what reality is, particularly for buyers, and then it kind of has a passive effect on sellers because of home value. So, what should buyers, as they're getting pre-approved this year, anticipate for and I hate always putting mortgage people on the spot. What's the interest rate going to be on June
Yeah,
1st?
totally.
As if you had any control over that, but
Yeah,
at least help us with the thought process about what should buyers anticipate interest rate wise, and if there's anything in the background changing about getting pre-approved, that'd be great too.
great call. Because after I answer that, I'm going to ask you to commit to tell me like what's going to happen with stock prices over the next 6 and 12 months. And
I
you're going
gotcha.
to have to tell me, if I should buy or sell my stock. And then, I'm going to hold like, then, yeah.
Short
Oh,
Nvidia.
yeah, right. All jokes, all jokes aside, forecasts for 2026, they vary some, but not a lot. So at the end of last year, I looked at a variety of different sources. So the National Association of Realtors, the Mortgage Bankers Association, companies like Zillow and Yahoo Finance, Realtor.com, like some of these companies and institutions, and they have major resources, the smartest people, the best forecasters. So I looked at what these forecasts were. And on the conservative side, forecasts for 2026 were that mortgage rates were going to end the year in the low to mid sixes. So, but that was people who are being more conservative or maybe more guarded. Some of the more optimistic economic forecast had things ending the year in the upper fives or most favorably in the mid fives. So if we
Wow.
kind of, yeah, and I'm not sure I'm on board with, I felt like we would see a little bit more relief this year, but if we balance those out, you're like, okay, more conservative people think we'll end the year in the low to mid sixes. We're like there or a little lower than that right now. And then more aggressive approaches say, well, in the year in the upper fives or the mid fives, we're starting the year like right around six even. So that just tells us we're likely going to be about where we are for this year. Don't shoot the messenger.
Yeah.
I want more rate relief this year too, because affordability, it's just with where prices got driven to during the pandemic, they've softened a little, but mortgage rates have exploded compared to those carrying costs from the time that allowed prices to get where they are. Um, Buyers could really use some relief just with the cost of how much it costs to purchase and service the debt. But this year looks like we're going to be about where we are. So that's a little bit about kind of what I've read into and what I saw. I may be a little bit more on the optimistic side. I feel like rates will continue to soften throughout the course of the year. But it's just a bit of wait and see. There's so much that pushes and pulls with.
Yeah. It's hard to know what to root for because lower interest rates will increase people's buying power because their monthly payment will be lower for a larger or the same for a larger loan amount. And I'm just not sure that what in the side the buyer's mind do they think, oh, I'm going to save money. They've already budgeted. Hey, my monthly housing budget is, I'll just say $5,000 or whatever.
Yeah,
And now they can borrow more money at that $5,000 monthly payment, so the prices will go up. So if they think
they will.
because I don't think that buyers want to pay less. Um, but then when I start thinking about what they can buy, I don't think they're doing the math that way. Or somebody else is willing to pay more because they're like, I got my budget's 5,000, so now I can buy more. And so there's price escalation. We're going back. I mean, the extreme was when we had 2%, right?
Sure.
That's why we're stuck where we are. And I don't, it's hard to root for that because
Yeah.
we've got so many people that are locked into these low interest rates. And after 5 years, they're at a place in life where they might need to upsize. Maybe they were originally empty, no kids yet in the city, and like, all right, let's buy a house and start a family. And now they've got multiple kids, and they need more room, but they can't sell their starter home and buy the next one because the monthly payment is still jumping. So obviously, lower interest rates will help give some relief to those people, but it might just perpetuate this kind of being locked in. So I'm not rooting against lower interest rates. Please, nobody, nobody write in the DMs or the comments sections that Adam wants higher interest rates. That's not what I'm saying. I said it was
Yeah.
hard to root for it.
Yeah. You're exactly right, though. The common consumer, I mean, like, regardless of what the percentile is, people are monthly payment driven. And
Yeah,
exactly as you described, whether it's 2 grand a month or three, or whether it's five or seven, um, people are payment driven. And so wherever the finances are of a family and they can afford X per month, they're just trying to get in and get started like in a challenging climate and where affordability is so challenged. They just want to get in and get started. So when somebody says, I can afford 5,000 per month and then rates come down a little, their first thought is not, okay, now I only have to spend 4,800. Their first thought is absolutely like, all right, I was able to buy at 800,000 before, or whatever the number is. And rates came down. That's great. Now I can go to 840 and still keep my same $5,000 payment.
yeah.
So yeah, people are definitely like payment driven that way.
Well, I imagine that you're maybe as interest rates have come down, you're getting some people who bought 12 months or 24 months ago after the rate increases that they're refinancing. And so they're able to have the same house, but for them it's costing them less. Are you seeing more refi over the last few months than you have been?
I'm seeing like exponentially amount more refinance activity in the last 30 to 90 days than really there's been for 2 to 3 years. And it's so nice to be able to say to a family who took that plunge, right, or took that jump 1, 2, 3 years back and tolerated 7 to 7.5%. It's so nice to be able to come back and say, we're finally here. Like, let's
Yeah.
go from 7.25 to 6.25. You're going to save $650 per month. I'm trying to stack two or three of those on top of each other. I think I still think that a bigger picture goal is for people to get, down between 4.5 to 5. We just don't really know when, but things I
Yeah.
try to remind buyers is once you own a piece of real estate and you have that asset, there will be strike points over
Yeah.
windows of time.
Yeah.
And so I always try to remind them, over the next 1, 3, 5, and 7 years, there will be opportunities. And the great part is, or like the interesting part, if we all remember, is when you're purchasing, we have very little control over this. Granted, a consumer decides to purchase, so they decide to tolerate the rate environment. But if we talk about last year, as we did, mortgage rates were as high as 7.25 and as low as 6.0. So it just based on when you find the right home and when you're shopping for the right home, you kind of had to just accept where the market was. But so let's say they caught things at a really tricky or less than optimal time at 7. Well, now in 2026, whatever the day is when rates hit 5.8 or 5.9, they'll be able to capitalize and take advantage of that because they own the home and they'll do a refinance. So there'll be opportunities to make reductions to a person who purchases today just has to understand that home ownership is normally a long-term journey,
Yeah.
and there'll be those opportunities. And it doesn't matter if it's April, July, September of 26 or 27. When there's the right set of economic conditions or political conditions or something that gives some rate opportunity, they'll be able to capitalize on it each time when those opportunities come. And that's part of it's always like that in every cycle, but with the challenge of affordability today, I think it's just important to remember that there will be some relief. You're never going to go up, kind of can only head in one direction over time.
As people are thinking about whether they might refinance, maybe you could give us some sense of what might their payment change. So let's say $1 million loan, and their whatever their loan is rate, but it drops 0.5%. So if they're able to get 0.5%, which in mortgage terms is a huge amount, but doesn't
Yeah.
feel like 0.5% doesn't feel that much. About how much money on a monthly payment do you think a typical owner on $1 million loan could save by refinancing?
Yeah. So I checked some stats on that prior to the call, and a 0.5% up or a 0.5% down, a 0.5% change on $1 million loan is about $320 per month.
Wow. All
So
right.
yeah, like each little eighth, I view them as just little increments, right? And so I think each increment was about $80 per month for each eighth of a percent. And when you put them all together, 0.5% for those eighths. So it was about $320 a month change.
Wow.
So yeah, it actually goes to shed light to say like we're a mixture of emotional and factual driven creatures, right? Because I think if we look at today's common buyer for how much the mortgage is, how much the taxes are, how much the insurance is, and we get to that total number, if I tell someone that their rate is 6.25 as opposed to 6.75, I mean, one number feels like it's basically 7,
Yeah.
and one number feels like it's basically 6. So emotionally, you feel like you're doing much better, you feel like you're doing much worse, but mathematically, yeah, it's actually not like a really huge impact, that half
Yeah.
percent swing.
I don't know, but $320 a month. I mean, that's a macchiato and a cornbread or a cranberry bread at Starbucks every day. So,
Yeah, yeah, it's true. I always like look at it. What utility bills can I no longer have to pay? Because I
Yeah.
like, you're trying to slash your budget here, slash the budget there. You're like, all right, well, I just saved $150 a month, but in theory, that means that like something I used to have to pay for that I no longer have to. So
you tell your wife and girls, and they need to start wearing hoodies that you're like, hey, turn that heater off.
that's a different podcast.
That's right. Well, let's talk about parenting and yeah, utility savings. All right. This has been super interesting. Anything else you want to share with us, kind of around this things, or of course, anybody that's interested in talking with Arlo, we'll put all his contact information in the show notes. We highly recommend him. We think that he works the same way that Sherry and I do. Excuse me, where we are very client centered, and he, as you can tell, is able to explain complicated subjects very easily. But I'll give you another chance. I asked the question, then I didn't give you a moment. Anything else you want to share with our clients?
Yeah, I think there is. Because we talked about the interest rate trajectory for this year and like this maybe high end of speculation and low end of speculation, which it's really a pretty tight range. Um, The real opportunity this, I think one thing that buyers who are considering purchasing a piece of real estate, and this is coming from somebody who is mortgage DNA and interest rate driven, the real opportunity this year is not going to come from interest rates. The real opportunity this year is going to come from market conditions
Hmm.
and when we ebb and flow of being more and less competitive.
Yep.
Um, because when you're competing against 3 or 5 people to purchase a home, that's obviously much better for the seller, and the buyers are all competing against each other, and that's what's going to drive things up. Through the last few years, we have really gone through some very different climates where we've caught some springs and we've caught some periods in the year where inventory has been very low and it has still been very competitive given the high rate environment, like more competitive than one would think. We've also caught some soft spots and some lulls in the market where buyers have been able to be one-on-one with a seller, and maybe a home's even been available for 30 to 60 days with no offers. And then a buyer comes in. So maybe it comes on at a price, they reduce the price after 30 to 40 days. And then the buyer can come in and they still have no offers, the seller. So then the buyer's been able to come in and take things even further or get even better terms from a seller. So catching those periods and listening to the counsel of the two of you as their agent, as an example, um, the timing this year is probably where people will make bigger wins, or be able to be more successful and maybe even get into a home that in an aggressive climate they could not have got into, and in a non-aggressive climate they can get into. So following the lead on that and really looking at timing and momentum of the market will probably be more impactful this year than trying to catch interest rates. I don't think that anybody really, this year doesn't look like the story is being told where it makes sense to wait for rates. You also don't need to rush because rates are going up. You'd want to focus on like market activity this year. And that's really where I think your wins are going to be created. I think that's helpful for them to know.
Great. Thank you, Arlo.
Yeah.
Share
Yeah.
any thoughts on that?
I agree 100% with that last comment and advice. In the last 30 to 60 days, we have written offers for less than list price, and we have negotiated substantial credits from sellers to buyers. So I think that if that continues, everybody will feel a little more or feel better about the home buying process, because for the first time, buyers might have some say in how much they're paying and what the terms are. So.
Home sellers might not agree with you, but home buyers will.
I agree. I agree. And I've not made a secret of my belief that sellers need to get a reality check on prices. Sorry to all our sellers,
Yeah.
but the prices are still a little high.
Yeah.
So, but the
Um,
market will take care of that. If it sits on the if it sits on the market for 60 to 90 days, they'll hopefully realize that there needs to be, it's always about price, right? It's one of my Sherryisms. It's
yeah.
always price.
Yeah.
So,
And sometimes it's the price in December is different than the price in March and different than the price in June. Not dramatically, but it's also
yeah,
got to pay attention
yeah.
to the normal cycles of it all. Yeah.
As long as the president doesn't mention tariffs in April again,
Oh gosh.
which killed our spring market last year.
Yeah. No comments.
Yeah, yeah.
All right. Uh, like I said before, if you are have any questions about refinancing or if you want to get pre-approved for a loan, we highly recommend Arlo. And again, all his contact info will be in our show notes. So uh, I gave you both last opportunity to say, so I'm just going to sign off. Dorothy was right. There's no place like home. See you next time.